All right, good evening, everyone. This is Rebecca Tweed, your hostess for our webinar tonight. I believe this is our 26th virtual town hall that we have hosted since we started these in April 2020. So thank you for being here. We will give it just a moment for folks to sign in. We get started a minute or two late also, and then we will go ahead and get started, and I'll walk through some of the housekeeping. But thanks for being here. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. All right, well, I know folks will be joining, but we will go ahead. We want to respect your time and always try to get through as many questions as possible. So thank you again for being here. I am Rebecca Tweed, happy to host this. You do not see me on screen, but you do see Senator Lynn Findley, Representative Daniel Bonham, and Representative Mark Owens. Just a few housekeeping items this evening. If you have questions that you would like our legislators to address, please use that Q&A feature down at the bottom. Couple reasons for that at the bottom of your screen. One, if it's a question that any of our legislators can answer, they can type right back to you. We also are able to capture those. And so if we don't get to your question during the town hall, it is collected on the back end and our legislators can follow up with you. We received about 89 questions in advance of this town hall today, so we will try to get through as many of those as possible. As always, we welcome you to participate with us in the chat with respectful commentary. We'll be sharing some links and different things through that, but really that's just a place for conversation, or if you need anything logistical to let us know. And we encourage you to use the raise hand feature also at the bottom of your screen if you have a question you want to ask live at any point during the town hall. So we'll start with some opening statements from our folks, opening remarks, I should say, and then jump into questions. And we will try to close as close to 6:30 Pacific Standard Time that we can. So with that, Senator Findley.
Well, thank you, Rebecca and Stacy and Sierra, for putting this together for the 26th or 27th time. You'd think we'd have the ability to count those and know for sure, but this has been highly successful and something that I personally look forward to every month now as we go through this. I'd like to thank everyone for your time. The ability for you to come and provide us an hour of your time tonight is very special for me. I truly appreciate that, because in this day and age, time is something we all have too little of. So thank you so much. I will try to keep comments to a minimum so we can get to the questions. You know, when the legislature was first designed and we met, we had there's two components of it. Component one was the sessions, legislative sessions. That's the 150 long days on the odd numbered years, the 35 in the even numbered years. And then the rest of the time was called the interim, which we're currently in the interim. And the interim has about once every 3 months, a 3-day legislative day with a 1 day dedicated to task forces as a component of that. Well, since we've moved to a mostly virtual endeavor, we now have legislature business every day. I mean, I don't know about these other guys, but you know, I participated in 3 Zooms today. I have Zooms throughout the rest of the week. So we're pretty much doing it 7 days a week, and which is fine. I'm not whining by any means, but I've recently been assigned to 2 new committees. That makes a grand total of 10 that I'm on. That seems excessive to me. I've tried not to accept them, but I sometimes don't get a vote in that. As most, I will go over my committee so everyone knows I'm on the Finance and Revenue Committee. I'm the Vice Chair of the Energy and Environment Committee. I'm on the Joint Transportation Committee. I was on the Interstate Bridge Replacement Committee. I'm on the new Reach Code Task Force, which meets every other week to talk about building codes and efficiencies within the building codes. I'm recently assigned to the Joint Gambling Committee, which I have no idea what that is, but I was appointed to that. It's a joint committee between the House and the Senate to deal with gambling issues, perhaps because I used to gamble a lot. I don't know. I'm on the Road User Task Force. I was recently assigned to the E-Board Education Subcommittee. You know, in 5 years I've been in the legislature, I've been very happy that I've avoided the Education Committee. Now I'm no longer able to say that. I'm also on the Joint Student Success for Underrepresented Students Committee, which we had a grueling 11-hour meeting just yesterday. So as we go through these committees are all meeting, most of them on every 2-week basis from 2 to 3.5 hours, which takes a lot of time and effort. And I'm happy to do that because I'm trying to put the viewpoint of Eastern Oregon into these efforts. And in the meantime, try to do other constituent work. I made a loop last week through Prineville, which will be my new part of my new district. Met some great folks to discuss an environmental issue that they had on with the Forest Service, so I was happy to do that. And, a couple of weeks ago, I was able to tour some areas in Lake County. Tis the season to go out and about, so I truly enjoy that. With that, we are working at an extremely frantic pace. And what's more is I got to the Capitol this morning, couldn't figure out how to get in the building. Nearly lapped the Capitol to finally find a door that I could get in, only to find halls that I used to walk down a couple of weeks ago are now boarded off. And so it's kind of hard to get around the Capitol with the CAMS 3, CAM standing for Capital Area Maintenance, 3 being for the third phase. They're really messing with the access into that building. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how and when our legislative session will be with extremely restricted access, because the middle part of the building is now going to be worked on in the next stage. So stay tuned with that. As we get figured out more, we'll hopefully have some input. If people are coming, let us know, and we'll try to get you the best way to park and the best way to get into the darn building. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues and we will get through this. So Representative Bonham.
Good evening. I think early on, I had a meeting with Senator Betsy Johnson when I first was appointed to the legislature, and she told me about the time commitment. And she said, this job, if you give it 20 hours a week, will take 20 hours a week. If you give it 40 hours a week, it'll take 40. If you give this job 80 hours a week, it'll consume all 80 hours, and not necessarily with a greater return. But you've got to find the balance for yourself. And I think no truer words have been spoken to me on how to approach this job. There's no end to policy rabbit holes you can go down to constituent engagement. I mean, there's always someone to talk to. There's always something to study and to understand better to do this job. And then I think I'm the only one of the three here right now that am in a primary race, and so I'm in election cycle. I'm running for office right now. I serve in the House District 59, which has been the Dalles all the way south, the Sisters out east to Wheeler County, Fossil Mitchell Spray, and beautiful Jefferson County in between. And so getting to know a new Senate district that takes me over to Canby, over the mountain, all of Hood River County and East Clackamas and East Multnomah counties. So it's been interesting, to say the least, to get out and knock doors and to hear from people, especially since we started campaigning in January. And the thing that's probably surprised me the most has been the transition of what people talk about. 3 months ago, election integrity was at the top of mind, and today it immediately is the cost of living. Like, it's affordability, the cost of fuel, the cost of food, and it's got people very concerned. Inflation, the cost of housing is another one. And so the state really does have affordability to consider. We have raised taxes, and we want to provide something to everyone but at the end of the day, right now, we've helped drive up the cost of living here in the state. So we are going to need to focus on what state agencies need to provide in terms of services. And we're going to have to start finding some areas to cut and to provide some relief to people in less taxation, less burden. And so that's what we've got coming up. I think after we restore some balance to the legislature with this next election cycle in November, I believe we're going to see the supermajorities go away. I think Republicans will pick up seats in the House and the Senate. And of course, the most interesting race will be the governor's race with 19 Republicans on the ballot, 15 or so Democrats, and then Betsy Johnson running as a non-affiliated vote. So we've got some interesting times ahead of us politically. And in the meantime, to Senator Findley's comments, we're still working on Warm Springs drinking water drought relief with Jefferson County. We still have affordable housing and childcare services that we're working on. The measure 110 stuff, I think we're going to get into later. I think we have a question on that we'll get back into, but there are a lot of things that the state is doing right now, and I'm not sure that there are a lot of things the state is doing well right now. And so with that, Representative Owens, let's give your introduction and then we'll go to the questions, right?
Sounds good, Rep. Bonham, Senator Findley. Good evening, all. Hope everybody's home safe, enjoying what here in Harney County was a beautiful day. Thankful that we've had some precipitation in April. There is some grass growing in the hills. By no means has it changed the hydraulic of the drought that we're going to have. As Rep. Bonham said, I mean, we're in for a tough one this summer. There's cows being sold because they can't already afford hay. There's land that's going to be fallowed, and we seem to be in a cycle of drought for the last 10 years. As a state, we need to try to figure out, continued short term for farmers and ranchers and those that depend on groundwater and surface water. But honestly, long term, we're going to have to really become drought resilient. And in my mind, the only way that we can do that is we got to slow water down through our system. We got to look at policy, rules, and regulations in order to store water underground, put speed bumps, store water above ground. And I hope that this drought necessitates those conversations and policy rule that we can get to where we can become more drought resilient. So if you're not looking forward to this summer, don't blame you, but be in contact with the three of us. We need to start working on some policy for drought. As Senator Findley and Rep. Bonham said, the interim is all what you'll give it to. I think I'm on 4 other task force also, 2 of them sharing them with Senator Findley. That seemed to take up a lot of time. As Senator Findley said, we are down in Western Oregon for, I think it's unrepresented students in higher education. And he says we had an 11-hour meeting yesterday, but he forgot to say that he missed the Monday 11-hour meeting that I was at. So he only attended half of them, but all kidding aside, a lot of things that we can be involved with that help our communities. And we talked about it a little bit last virtual town hall, is that even now we're starting to put in legislative concepts for 2023. Some of the ones that I said that we're working on is, school board authority on what gets taught in schools, making sure that parents have choice in education opportunities. We filed those. We're going to file another one, basically, that we've had some constituents reach out and say, state government shouldn't be competing against private businesses, whether that's in supplying herbicide or trout. We shouldn't be impeding private. What I'm asking for is we're here to serve you guys. We're here to try to change policy on something that you see as an issue. So email us, call us, get together. We want to help be your voice in Salem. We want to bring that legislative concept forward. Another one that we're exploring that we've heard from people in Grant County and Harney County and all over Oregon is, the public meeting law, sunshine law. Is Oregon transparent enough? I would say no. We're going to try to work through that. But honestly, if you have an issue in state government where you think policy can help, get a hold of us. We can have you work directly with legislative counsel to work through your idea and see if there is the change that's needed. The other thing that both gentlemen brought up forward is our number one job is to work with you if you're having any trouble with state agencies. We all have excellent staff. I mean, from Stacy, Sierra, and I'm not sure exactly who's working at Bonham now, but they work 40, 60 hours a week alongside us. If you have an issue with, I don't care, Water Resource Department, DEQ, you name it, email us. We can get an answer for you. Share a little story. There was, people trying to get CDL licenses in Burns, and they were being shipped all the way to Ontario to take a license. They finally got a hold of our office, and we were able to set up those CDL classes or training and licensing right here in Harney County. So if the agency is not working for you, get a hold of us. We'll try to help you. I look forward to the questions tonight, and hope everybody's having a good time.
Great. Well, thank you, and appreciate folks leaning into the chat too with sharing where you're from. It's, we get lists and we get names, but it's great to have you here and let everybody else kind of see what's going on. So quite a few folks from around the state. So we are going to jump right into the questions for this evening. And our legislators will, one of them may answer, two of them may answer, but we'll try to get to everybody that we can. We'll start with you, Senator Findley. Christine from Ontario would like to know what's happening with the Reload project, and can you explain some of the costs, and maybe for everybody that's on the town hall tonight, just give a brief intro to what that is. It's been in the news quite a bit, but give us an update, tell us what it is and what your thoughts are on it.
Well, thank you for the question. If one could read the local, one of the local newspapers and think that the Reload project is the worst thing since bread was made. Another one will say that the Reload is great for the community. The Reload Center was envisioned in 2015 as a means to assist onions and other commodities grown in Malheur County with a shipment to the East Coast. And once it gets to the East Coast, distributed appropriately. And in 2017, in the transportation bill, $26 million was earmarked to build the facilities, all the infrastructure of the facility, including the rail and everything component of that. And that was the funding was set at $26 million, and it was put in the Oregon Department of Transportation in a program called Connect Oregon. So, which Connect Oregon is a transportation component to deal with bike ped, rail, and the project has struggled from the start because it was a round peg trying to fit into a square hole. ODOT took a little while to get the rules written on how they would do it. They asked for several economic analysis and had those analysis reviewed by independent authorities to see whether it was a viable project to do. That took about 1.5 years to do. Those studies were done, and it was pointed out that it was a very economically viable and feasible project and would be good for the community, good for the region. So they started awarding. They had a vigorous site selection committee. I served on that site selection committee, and they went and found several different sites. We went through an evaluation criteria and selected the site that we do for transportation methods, for growth, for compatibility with the area, including access to the mainline rail. One thing that we found was when we started this project, I happened to be the city manager in the city of Vail. I thought we could put it in Vail because it was a great thing. We had a short line there. The railroad came to me and says, guess what? We don't deal with short line railroads. It has to be off the main line. And that has to deal with the size of the cars that works on those, that hauls those commodities to the East Coast. So design was completed based on this is what we think it's going to be. The design was completed in like 2019, thinking we had a $26 million budget, which we did. And throughout the next 2 years, as the actual design was drawn, the permits and the contracts with RailPro, the contracts with Americold to operate the facility drug out. They actually started construction last fall. As they got into construction, the prices went up significantly on some of those. And so there were some price pinches and price points that they're making it hard to deal with a $26 million project. And the funding from this is the sale of lottery bonds, and it's a grant to the county and to the operator of that facility. The operator is operating it for the county. And the $26 million is not stretching as far as you think it should. With inflation, the number is, even as they went through started the construction in the dirt work area where the rail lines were to be. They found some softer spots in the ground. They had to do more excavation, and they overran some of the costs for the road, the rail beds and some of that work. So the costs went up. So they went back and they looked at the design, says, well, what in this design is nice to have and what in this design is must have. And so they went through the must haves and checked all those boxes. They went to the nice to haves, which would be what we'd really like to have, but if the funding is not there, it's not there, and it would not prohibit the project from moving forward. And they pared it down to match the approved budget, but they're still a little short because of some of these expenses. The fact that the building materials went up significantly. We tried to buy the building in advance, and some of that happened, but the costs have gone up because of the excavation, the rock, and the roadbed preparation. Remember, the rail track has to be able to hold a 256,000-pound rail car. So they have to be pretty good base to it. And they did more excavation to get to the good solid ground. So the costs are up anywhere between $3 and $6 million. Through the valued engineering and what we must have and what would be nice to have, they got that down, and they're still short about $3 million. That's a request that Representative Owens and I have carried forward at the request of the county. We carried that request forward to try to seek additional funding from the state to help bring this project online. We absolutely believe that the project will be online by fall. You have to realize that this is not a facility that will receive onions directly out of the field. The onions will be processed, sent to a packer. They will pack it into a means that can head to the East Coast, and then it will be moved to the rail facility for implementation, put on a large train of multiple cars called a unit train, and moved to the East Coast. All indications are that if we can secure the last $3 million, we'll be able to open this facility by the time the onions are ready to ship out of here. And if we're not able to, some tough cuts may have to be made. And it's not that it was over designed. It's not that it was a Cadillac versus a Chevy. It's the fact that these are all nice to have, and in an ideal world, this would be a great thing. But inflation is catching this project pretty well, as was a few overruns. So some cuts had to be made, and those cuts are being made, and they're being implemented as we speak. So the facility has a world-class operator that signed on, a miracle. They do this all over the world. They will take these rail cars and they will ship them to the East Coast via Union Pacific Railroad, where they'll enter hubs and networks, so they'll be distributed throughout the East Coast to make it a much better model than currently exists, taking 400 to 500 trucks a month off the road. And it'll be a great thing once we get it done. There's some naysayers that are thinking everything is the world is worst and bad about this project. It's really not the case. I would invite anyone to contact the development office or my staff, and we'll try to help you with that. But it's a great project. I look forward to be shipping onions out of the Treasure Valley by early fall.
Great. Well, thank you. And I think that background is helpful to folks who aren't as connected to it directly in the community to understand that really what you're talking about is, economic development and industry, right? Needing to have the ability to move product and how that works. That impacts everybody.
The project was designed for economic development 100%.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. So there's some side benefits of carbon footprint, removing trucks. Trucks are a hard thing to find anyhow. So yeah, it was a great idea. It's economically viable. Two different companies have reviewed the business model and speak very highly of it. So we just have to get through the construction phase, and everybody's if you're trying to build anything right now, realize that the construction costs are through the roof. So yeah, it makes it a little difficult, but it will happen.
Great. Well, thank you. And we'll keep folks updated on that through our legislative newsletters. Rep Owens, we're gonna pop to a question for you, and it actually came up in the chat earlier, and you answered it, but would be good for everybody else. Chris Cronin asked, what do you see happening with the superintendent board training bill in the future? That was something you had been working on during the short session. Where do you see that going, and what can we look forward to learning about it?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Chris. So during the short session, OSBA had some priorities, and one of them was board training. And I've come out publicly, and I still will say today that I think board training for school boards is a good thing. I think that if you're going to sit on any board, that you need to understand public meeting law, you need to understand quorums, and with school boards, you probably need to understand some basic school budget and other things. The bill that came forward in the short session, unfortunately, I couldn't support because I thought it was just a little too much involvement with ODE, trying to design exactly what type of trainings need to occur that might go different against the basics that I just mentioned. OSB has reached out to me since then, and we are collectively working on a pare down school board training bill that would allow school boards to have the opportunity to seek some training, and some will probably be mandatory. Yeah, hopefully it'll come out, and hopefully it's something that we can get broad bipartisan support and move forward with. So thanks, Chris, for the question, and thanks for continuing to be engaged with this subject with me.
All right, Representative Bonham, we have a question from Elizabeth in Beaver Creek. A little bit of backstory. She shared that her family had to evacuate their farm livestock from the wildfires. Farm got hit by the extreme heat dome, and now they're losing some of their mature Douglas fir trees. It's hard to address carbon emissions at the state level, but is there anything that can be done to help in that arena? Is there anything that Oregon can do to work with our federal delegation to get some support to help with wildfires and wildfire support this year?
I mean, honestly, well, Senator Findley is probably the better one to answer with respect to federal support on fire efforts, but with respect to, that's a tough one. I gotta be honest with you, that you got me thinking. You know, we passed legislation to modify the fleet that we use for firefighting, moving away from older turboprops to jet powered planes. We've added capacity with training for additional cross utilization of people that do structure fire versus wildland fire. There was significant investment. I think the big one that still exists, though, that the governor herself identified through a task force, was that we have all the treated land, millions of acres of treated land, and she had estimated, I think, a total cost of $4 billion it would take to treat 200 million a year over the next 20 years to treat the acreage that's out there that truly has been left ungroomed, nurtured, for lack of a better term. You know, I would love to see additional harvest. I think there are things that we can do through the Good Neighbor Authority to expand harvest and thinning and do some work. We identified the wildland urban interface as an area that we need to focus on to make sure that the communities that have kind of grown into our national forest areas and state forest areas and private forest areas have proper grooming and proper, you know, forest protections, and thin to the point where if a wildfire would reach a community, that it would run out of available fuel. So there are things that are being done. You know, I think the challenge is, even within the state framework and the approach that we've taken to work with our federal partners, that it's a 20-year plan, and quite frankly, it's a 20-year buildup of what needs to have been done over the previous 20 years to put us in the position that we're in. I mean, we have more trees, we have more fuel today than we've ever had, and so there is significant work to be done. I just think it really is going to come down to the dollars and cents of it. And the reason why I've pushed for more utilization of the Good Neighbor Authority is it actually can pay for itself. There's other states that have utilized that framework to do the thinning work, to do some harvest, to allow the private sector to come in and utilize timber sales to then fund the next NEPA certification, which is the federal review of the environment to make sure that that timber sale is ready to move forward. But you get the private sector to invest in the project, the federal government or the state then can utilize those proceeds to get the next project rolling. And it is supposed to be additive. It's supposed to be stuff that's not already on the books. So I would think that that is probably our best bet, to utilize the framework of the fire protection bill that we just passed, and then to move forward with the available resources like the Good Neighbor Authority that are out there.
Great.
I might add, Rebecca, to that is Representative Bonham absolutely correct. Senate Bill 762 that passed in the last calendar year identified several things to do, and it's hazard analysis, risk mapping. Those things are going on as we speak. They're supposed to be laying out identification of the wildland urban interface, identify the hazard areas, but it also had components in there to increase the capability of the Oregon Department of Forestry. It also will increase the Rangeland Fire Protective Association and the authorities to do that, and include agriculture areas like in North Central and Northeast Oregon. But the bottom line is that, as Representative Bonham said, is that cooperation with the feds is very critical in pulling this off. And a healthy forest and a healthy landscape doesn't burn like an unhealthy one. And we have to do the thinning. We have to work on and treat the ground to remove some of the risk. So that's something that we have to do. And there's some resources allocated in Senate Bill 762 to do that and increase the capability. But we have to engage the feds, I believe. They're a critical component. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, Senator Findley and probably Rep. Owens, this next question is for you from Kevin in Lakeview. Do you think the legislature will hold any meetings on Lake Abert after the Senate Committee on Natural Resources canceled its meeting, or take any action to help save Lake Abert and Lake County?
Well, Kevin, let me start with that, and then Representative Owens is the correct person. Is the reason the Senate canceled their hearings, they did it at my request, was because the week before the House held those same hearings, and it would have been a duplicative effort and would have sent the wrong signal. I participated with the House committee on a tour. We spent the day in Paisley and looked at Abert Lake. We looked at the meadows, we looked at the watershed. But there was the action to be taken, and Representative Owens can talk about it. The only reason the Senate did not do that, and the reason the Senate canceled their hearings, is there's no reason to have two chambers have the same hearing on the same issue, requiring all of the people to get together to have those conversations 1 week after the other one. I thought that was silly, because there's one lake and one set of users, and there should not be two state agencies trying to figure out how to help them. So, Representative Owens.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Findley. The Lake Abert issue, along with a lot of our issues on lack of water, I mean, the main cause of that right now is the drought. So I did appreciate that Senator Findley did try to get the hearing stopped on the Senate side, because we did have a informational hearing on the House side. And in fact, after that informational hearing, we got with that local community, and Senator Findley and I, Rep. Helm, and others agencies joined that community down there and went for a tour. We learned a lot about that system. We learned a lot about the meadows there, the runoff, and the lake. And the truth of the story down there right now is, if you would pipe every water that came from the runoff and dump it into Lake Abert would still be dry this summer. We're in the middle of a 1,200-year drought. There's not enough water. Things are changing. Water's becoming shorter. There's probably not a whole lot you can do in the balance of that in order to get Lake Abert to where we'll be in a normal water year. Those meadows that the ranchers and the community use have an ecological benefit. In fact, they haven't really changed that from the riparian areas of 100 years ago. The system basically works the same. It used to flood through those meadows before it would go to Lake Abert. It still does. Those meadows provide, like I said, a big ecological benefit. We start pulling one string there, it's going to unravel. We'll probably have some follow-ups. I know the governor's office is still working with the conservation groups because they sent a letter demanding some action. Still working with some of the tribes. I'm still in contact with the local community down there weekly to try to work through this. But the short answer is I'm glad the Senate didn't have a hearing on it also, because we had one in the House. And there's going to be a lot of things that don't have water when you're in a 1200-year drought.
Great. Well, thank you. Rep Bonham, next topic for you. So the legislature passed the first in the nation bill for veterans dental coverage. Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So it was something that came up before session. Representative Cedric Hayden, who is a dentist, asked me if I was aware of whether or not veterans had any dental coverage, period. And I had no idea. So we started looking into it, and ultimately he discovered that if you were below a certain level of income, you were covered by Medicaid at the state level. But otherwise, if you were in a window of I believe it was 125% to 400% of average median income, that you had zero. And then, of course, if you're beyond 400% of average median income, it's understood that you could most likely afford your own dental coverage. But we thought that this was a gap in coverage, and something that's absolutely necessary is oral health with respect to your global personal health. And when someone has served our country and really put their lives on the line to guarantee our freedoms and liberties, I think that it's something that we should absolutely step up and take care of, and to have oral dental coverage absent from what the VA currently provides, we thought was something that was a shortfall in with respect to our veterans and the value that we place on them and the duty that they perform. So we put forward a bill. Ultimately, I think the budget is about $5 million the state is going to pick up. This is a first in the nation coverage that exists now in Oregon for veterans, again, within a certain level of income, to make sure that they're able to have dental coverage. So excited about that. And again, hats off to Rep Hayden, being a dentist himself, understanding the nuance of how that coverage works. And working with him on that bill was an absolute pleasure and an honor, and grateful that we now get to say that we're going to take care of our veterans in a special way here in the state of Oregon.
That's great. Thank you. I think the next question, we'll start with you, Senator Findley, and it's a similar question from Laurel in Eugene, actually, wanting to address, what's going on with homelessness, what's going on with affordable housing, and specifically, is there anything being worked on to help our veterans with more affordable housing? Obviously, you've all addressed that affordable housing and homelessness is a big issue. Maybe we can start with you and talk about what you're seeing, what can people look forward to as legislation that can help with these issues, but break that down a little bit for us. And again, it's a question from Laurel and Eugene, but we probably had 20 different questions about the housing crisis and homelessness crisis in Oregon. So a lot of folks interested in this.
Thank you. And thank you, Laurel, for the question. I think the number I heard about a month ago was Oregon's 110,000 housing units behind, which is a big lift. One of the big issues that I believe with accomplishing or reducing some of that is our land use planning system. The way it works now is it makes it difficult to find housing or available land to build houses with. Some of the facts that we've passed recently is to do some vertical development, which works fine in the urban areas, but not so much in the rural areas. Specifically to veterans, we passed 2 years ago, I believe it was, legislation to raise the recording fees for when you record something in the county clerk's office, titles and other things. with 25% of that increase to be reserved for veterans housing. And the problem with that is it sounds like a great deal, and it is a great deal, but it's a slow process to spin up without just saying, here's $100 million to start the program. Here's a funding stream, but we have to figure out how to get more land available to develop. And we have to spread that out statewide and not use the current system that we do when most of these allocations are made, is it's on a cost benefit analysis. The problem is that rural areas will never compete in a cost benefit analysis when you're only serving 100 people or 1,000 people as opposed to tens of thousands in the urban areas. So we have to figure out how to get more of that carved out or set aside for rural areas to deal with those housing units. But it's something that every year we pass some legislation. Most generally, it has not been as successful as we'd liked. But I know ODVA, Oregon Department of Veterans Administration, is trying to gin up some of this interest. The Housing Authority has the money available through that recording fees. Some of the stumbling blocks is the land use side of it, which is something we have to go to work on.
Great, well, thank you. And in a moment, I'm going to put some information in the chat for everybody. The Oregon Employment Department just started a new priority service program for veterans and spouses of veterans on different services that are available for them. And so we'll get that into the chat in a second. Rep. Owens, I know you're excited to talk about this issue. There's no way that we can avoid it. We have a question in the chat. Let's just narrow it down. What's going on with water right now? What are you working on to address not just water rights and that issue, but the drought and what's happening in the state? Give us some updates on water in Oregon right now.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Like I said in some of my opening remarks, I mean, Oregon is in a horrific drought. The West Coast is in a horrific drought. And for the last 10 or 15 years, we've been having more and more drought cycles. The short answer is in June, the E-Board, I'm sure there'll be some money put back in for immediate relief. And there is some need for immediate relief for farmers, ranchers, different people that have assessments that have to be paid, even though they're not going to get water because they're not going to be able to grow a crop. The truth of the matter is we need to have a real hard conversation, because in Oregon, we have to have a plan during drought and not even drought, and how we can use less water, how we can have a more even distribution of water for, fish and farms. We have to be able to get our farmers enough water to stay in business. I mean, food and fiber is very important, and we have some bread baskets in Oregon that need that water. There's enough water that comes through Oregon to probably accomplish all the needs. We got to figure out how to slow it down. We have to figure out how to store it, and we got to make sure that we have regional approaches that will work. We need to empower local communities with information to whether they can meet their current demand, whether they can meet future demand, and how they meet demand during drought. They have to have that information. They have to have the ability to work through that, and they have to partner with the state in those plans. And until we get to that point, we're always going to be reactive. Until we get to that point, we're going to have farmers going bankrupt in some of the most productive land in the world. We have enough water. We got to figure out how to utilize it. And hopefully this drought will cause those policy conversations to come forward. Hopefully this drought will cause us to sit down with those that aren't on the same lifestyle as we are, don't have the same priorities that we have, but we got to be able to utilize the resource there is. There was a question in chat, about cities and towns and people moving in and using water. That's all part of the equation. I honestly believe in most parts of the state, if we better manage the resource, there's enough water for economics, ecological, and social, but it's going to take some very tough conversations. And we need to get there, folks, and we're going to need your help.
So I do want to say real quickly, though, the concept of limiting growth boundaries is a challenge. Like, it is part of the problem that we face right now with our housing pricing. We have people from out of state coming in and buying up housing, and locally they're if you sell and you want to live in the same community that you're in, the challenge of not only finding something that's available, but finding something that's in a price range that's affordable is absolutely a real challenge for a lot of people right now. I know my wife was saying, hey, it'd be fun to buy this house that a friend of ours is selling. And when I looked at the price he was asking for it, I was, quite frankly, even though we now own our home and have some equity, we can't afford that mortgage. And I don't doubt that his home is worth twice what mine is, but at the time I think we bought, mine was probably worth 2 and his was probably worth 400,000. And now that his is worth 850 and mine's worth 4, the delta is still so great. And within interest rates going up, it's a big challenge. So I don't know that limiting growth right now is the best play. But I will say this about water and energy. I mean, you want to talk about the reasons why we've lifted more people out of poverty here in the United States. Yes, our free market is a huge part of that, but affordable energy and access to water is another huge part of that. And to Rep Owens' comments about, we have enough water. We are right now dumping more water back into the Pacific Ocean than we should be. We're running more water through our systems than I think it necessary to allow for fish passage and other things. And so we need to capture that water. I mean, there's 2 ways that you add more water to our system, and that's to either store it or to conserve it. And I think we should be incentivizing conservation investment. I don't say subsidize, I mean incentivize. There should be some tax benefit on the back end offered to people that can come in and upgrade their system with some sort of conservation. But other than that, when was the last time, Rep Owens, that we had a storage project of significant size here in the state of Oregon? I mean, that is what needs to be done. We need more storage. We need to capture more water, hold it. If you look nationwide at what's happening with, lakes that exist behind dams, and people say, wow, we're at historic lows. Well, the usage calculations were calculated based on historic highs. And so we've allocated water based on the storage that we had in record highs. And so we're over allocating the water behind the dam. It's not that the water has necessarily gone away. It's that we're pushing more of it into the system. So unless we're going to start to limit where we send water and how we send water, the only answer is to add more water to the system. And it's either, I don't want to get to the point necessarily where we have to desalinize ocean water and ship it over the mountains to Eastern Oregon, but that's, if you look at what Israel did, that's a way to turn arid desert into fertile farmland is to bring more water into the equation. It's going to come at a cost, but at some point Oregon is going to have to face some of these questions of where do we want to farm, and if we're going to choose to stay a farming community and an agriculture community, which we have over 200 crops we grow here in the state of Oregon, we're going to have to find water for people and to make sure that it's available consistently, so people don't invest in this potential business of farming and then tell them next year, hey, by the way, it's not there. We've got 60 plus 75% of Jefferson County last year going into this year that they're going to have to leave land fallow, and coming up with creative solutions to pick up more water rights so that they have enough water to just cover the land that they originally were farming. Water is a challenge, but energy is too. And to the extent that we're talking about carbon policies or anything that's going to make energy more expensive, I think we need to be mindful of, spokes on a wheel and a balanced approach to energy that allows us to keep affordable energy options while at the same time mitigating our carbon footprint.
I might add, last January, we had a special session and we did what I call Drought 1, which we passed a drought, $99.75 million drought package. And we're currently in discussions on Drought 2. I believe at the upcoming e-board, we're going to have a discussion about how we can do the drought packages. And the drought packages we're dealing with are just Band-Aids. They're not dealing with exactly what Representative Bonham or Representative Owens have talked about, which is increasing our storage, doing some more conservation. We're just trying to figure out how to keep people alive and survive. The impacts are significant. Jefferson County is estimated to 75% of their good fallow farm ground or good farm ground will be fallow. Having conversation with several other counties throughout the district to get those same percentages, and it's amazing the amount of good farm ground that produces crops that we know goes to the same Safeways that most of the urban areas think that's where all the food comes from. We're not going to be able to do that. You take 75% of your good farm ground out of production, the food supply is going to go down, and we have to figure out how to do a better job of managing that. So we continue to do our Band-Aids, but we need to look at the big fix, and we're not doing that very well as of yet. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I know we could talk about that, and maybe we'll even host a virtual town hall on water and those issues. We do have a raised hand, so I would like to grab that, make sure we get to Mark Albertson. Mark, I'm going to ask you to unmute in a second, and you'll be allowed to ask your question. You should be here with us.
Can you hear me? Good evening, guys. I kind of got a several part question. What do you guys think would be a way to diversify our rural and frontier counties for better economic development is one of the questions. How can we educate urban communities and prove to them that we are good stewards of our farms and forests? And then I got an idea on that later. Y'all jump at once.
Hey, Mark, great questions there, Commissioner Albertson. Yeah, as a former county commissioner, I struggled with those too. How do we diversify our economy? Well, first of all, we got to support the small businesses there. The backbone of any economy is the economy that's already currently. We got to try to figure out how to make those small businesses gain one more employee. We got to make sure how those small businesses, if they produce something, export something, we can expand their market. So first of all, always look forward to trying to support the business that are in your community, and try to figure out the entrepreneurship on how to get new ones in there. A lot easier said than done. What I'll spend some time on though is how can we show those that don't live in our communities that we are good stewards of the land? The best way, and you were part of that and you helped host that, was like the tour we did a month ago, Mark. When your community opened up to agencies, opened up to others and said, hey, come into our backyard. Let me show you what we're doing. Let me show you what's working. That was impactful. Then you went up and took us up into the fire areas and said, hey, we're not wanting pity here, but we need some help. These horrific fires have come through and nobody's staying around to try to figure out what we can do to this landscape now. So continue as you are, Mark, to be a messenger for your community. Invite people in. Let's show them. The best way you can do it is to show them. And you've been doing it, my brother. You've been doing it. Keep it up.
I might add the best way for economic development in rural Oregon is growth and not handouts. All these state programs that dole money out to rural Oregon is not helping. The best way to do it is to reduce the red tape and the regulations and let these communities grow. That is the best way for economic development, and by far, and that's something that we push for every day. I know the three of us spend a lot of time trying to educate the urban legislators about the issues affecting rural Oregon. But in my belief, the best way we can do this is to let the rural areas grow themselves and not be the benefit of handouts that don't always work. But thanks for the question, Commissioner.
Yeah, I'll say this to a county commissioner who's probably heard this a time or two. If you've seen one county, you've seen one county. I think one of the challenges, Commissioner Albertson, is that each one of these communities offers unique opportunities. Whether or not infrastructure exists is another question. High speed internet access doesn't necessarily exist in every corner of the state. Some are closer to natural resources, some are closer to recreation areas. And I do think it's up to the local community to market what they want more than anything. To the extent that the state engages in economic development, sometimes I feel like we're pulling from tax dollars in Eastern Oregon and spending in Portland. So one of the fights that we continue to make in economic development conversations is just making sure that those dollars get spread out and that they get reinvested back where they came. But it definitely is a challenge. I do go back to the water and energy conversation and the infrastructure comment, not just with respect to the internet and the access to broadband, but we also have aging infrastructure. I mean, to the comment, to the question earlier about utilizing water resources, cities taking that into account when they're adding capacity for housing. I do think that's a consideration for a lot of Eastern Oregon communities. A lot of us in smaller towns have, 100-year-old infrastructure, wooden water pipes and whatnot, and water treatment systems that are at capacity. So there are considerations that we have there as well. And that's again where I do think the state can step up and invest some dollars to overcome some of the aging infrastructure that does exist in and throughout Eastern Oregon.
Well, I think that is a great question. Thank you, Commissioner. We're just about short on time, but I do want to get to this question. Rep Bonham, it's for you, from Stephanie in the Dalles. She says, you've been a wonderful advocate for Ezra's Law for a long time. Are there any moves to bring this back for consideration in the next session, or what are you doing to work on that during this interim that you guys referenced?
So I'm super excited to tell you, Stephanie, that we've had some momentum. We got the committee, the Judiciary Committee, to assign us a work group. And it may seem like nothing, but the difference between those of us that are chasing a bill in the interim by ourselves versus someone that has a work group is staff. So paid staff. The Legislative Policy and Research Office that staffs our committee hearings, the people that have the policy expertise, are now going to help us staff a work group. And I also have a former DA, House member, Democrat out of Bend, Representative Jason Krupp, that's come into this conversation and is eager to engage. We've had some challenges in the last couple of years going back and forth with some definitions that are within that bill. It gets pretty complex when you start talking about permanent disability. Excuse me. What is a permanent disability? Is your eyesight going from 2020 to 2040 a permanent disability? I don't think so. When we say, blindness or loss of hearing, we actually mean total loss, things that would impact your ability to stay employed, your way of life, loss of a limb. The one that's the biggest challenge, and the one that, he and I are going to work on after the primary, we're going to dive in and have some meetings down in the Madras area, where Ezra's grandma, Tina Jorgensen, who's been the champion of this bill, we're going to bring her into the mix and bring some DAs into that conversation in the defense lobby as well, and have the conversation over what is permanent cognitive loss. When we talk about loss of mental state, what is it that we're trying to define? And there is some concern that language wasn't necessarily as specific as it should be. So I think if we can get those definitions nailed down, then we really are just talking about what the sentencing should reflect to provide some sense of justice for these victims. So I'm eternally optimistic with most things in life, but I am very optimistic that Ezra's Law will come into play in 2023 and we'll see it pass. Restoration. I was going to say restoration of some balance in Salem will also help greatly.
It absolutely will. I might add that I went through my list of bills today. That bill was on my list. I said, we'll put that in as a placeholder until Representative Bonham becomes Senator Bonham, and the Senate will push that bill out. So but we will get that bill out this year.
Well, that's great. Well, I know we're at time. I also know we have questions. As folks know who've joined us before, we will always follow up after, but want to give you each a minute or so to talk about, what's most important to you right now. What's your priority, either legislatively or in your community? What do you want to leave us all with today? Obviously, we're less than 3 weeks out of an election, so that's on folks' mind, but give us your last 1 minute of what you'd like to say. Rep. Owens, we'll start with you for this one.
1 minute, perfect. Hey, both the gentlemen have talked about balance. I'll say it too. The most important thing that you could do is get out and vote. That's coming up, probably going to come up before we meet again. Take your neighbor, fill out your ballot, get it in. It's the only way that we can change the balance and get it done. The biggest concern probably right now is how we work through the water conversation long-term. Went on a water tour today. We're going to be down in Lake County on May 18th, 19th, talking water. We spend a lot of time talking water. Hopefully this horrific drought will cause the impetus that we need in order to get some policy done, that we can slow down water and utilize it better. Be safe this summer. We're going to go back out on the road end of May. Going to come up in different counties. We'll send some information out. I'd like to get together with you in person. We'll keep doing these virtually, but it's important for all of us to see in person. So I'll be quiet and hand it over to Rep. Daniel Bonham.
Well, thank you, Rep. Owens and Senator Findley, Rebecca, Sierra, Stacy for putting this on. I really do appreciate these. These are fun. Going out and knocking on doors and campaigning, coffee visits and town halls. I miss this so much. COVID stole that from us for 2 years. And so I'm so glad to see people smiling faces again in person and having the chance to interact. It really is the best part of this job. That said, please engage. Attending meetings like this is fantastic. Having policy thoughts. You asked us questions, we gave you answers, but I will continue to say that none of the three of us are smarter than everyone. Like no one is smarter than everyone. And so if you've got an idea, if you've got a concept, if you've got something that's happening in your community that you think is wrong or that you think is great, call us, tell us about it. If you, there's a question about a law in Idaho, I don't know about that one, so I can't respond to it, but if there's something that you've seen globally that you think is something that we should be doing here in the state of Oregon, let us know, tell us about it, engage in the conversation with us. People have been fascinated. I send out on my flyers, I put my personal cell phone. So all my campaign material has my cell phone number and people call it. And when I answer, they're surprised, but we are local legislators. We are citizen legislators. And so, I know both of these gentlemen are humble enough, we're not that special of people. We got into this, we're doing the job, but at the same time, call us, engage with us. We want to hear from you. It really does mean the world to us that you took time out of your day to be here tonight. And so thank you for joining us. And with that, we'll turn it over to Senator Findley to close us out.
Thank you so much, Representative Bonham, Representative Owens. Your question is, what are we focusing on right now? I listed the committees that I'm on and the task forces. There's 10 of them. Most all of those have some goals in mind to limit the way of life for rural Oregonians, whether it be from building codes to restrictive road user fees to everything. And I'm focusing on that to try to limit the impacts to rural Oregon on every chance I get, from figuring out how to raise taxes. My Democratic colleagues never seem to stop that. So how can we fix that? Is balance. And as Representative Owens said, vote. The only way to fix the balance is that everyone has to vote. Please vote. Please tell your friends to vote. I always used to say vote early and vote often, but I really can't say that anymore. The county clerks and Secretary of State really get cranky when I say that. But vote early. Get your ballot in, make it count. It's such a wonderful state to live in, and it can be salvaged and turned over. if we establish some balance in the legislature, it will actually become more responsive to what we're supposed to be doing. So I can't say enough about, I thank you all for your coming. Thank you for Rebecca and Stacy and Sierra. On administrative days, they pulled it off another coup. They've done an incredible job. And it's my pleasure to work with the two gentlemen on either side of me because I'm in the middle of my screen. And such a great support staff. The only way to do this is to have a great staff. Surround yourself with good friends and good staff, and then you look good. So you see me on the screen. I do not look good, but thank you all for your time. I appreciate everyone, and please have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.